What's going on, everybody? Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and whatever time it is. So welcome back to yet another video with you, man, Emergaholic. And ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause is needed because we have the faction overview series back for Divide at Impera. I know many of you guys have been hitting me up about it. Emergaholic, where the hell's it at, fam? Give us more factions, give us more. I really appreciate the love and support for this series. I really enjoy doing these faction overviews for you guys. However, Divide at Impera has recently, over the last few months, been undergoing some pretty big changes. And the most recent change, of course, being the 1.3 beta update for DEI. 1.3 has not yet been made into an official update, but it will be probably within the next week or two. There hasn't been any major issues with it, just some minor adjustments have been happening. And so, ladies and gentlemen, considering the changes that have occurred to the barbarian factions in particular, such as the Thracians and all of the Germanic and Celtic factions, we will be going through and redoing any barbarian faction that we've done before, and we'll be continuing the faction overview series. I'm really hyped for this. I know a lot of you guys are as well. I hope even more of you are going to be hyped. Please, of course, place your faction overview requests down below. But without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get started with the faction overview series for the Odrysian Kingdom. Okay, everybody, I know we have done the Odrysians before, but like I said, we're going to redo them because the Odrysians, alongside the other barbarian factions, have been overhauled. Each faction is overhauled to a different degree, so you might not see all that many changes compared to previous overview videos, but I'm just doing it anyway, and I will do it again in the future if needed, if there's even bigger updates, so just a little FYI. But anyway, the Basileon Odrysian, otherwise known as the Odrysian Kingdom, is part of the Daci, Thraci, and Illyrian cultural group. I know I say that C with a shush. So like Dacian, I don't say Daki or Daki. That's just me. That is how it is. And as a result of being of that cultural group, though, we have two perks that we get when we play the Odrysians. We get Distinct Peoples perk, which gives us +2 public order from Dacio, Thracian, and Illyrian culture. Very interesting. We also get Civilized Savages, which gives us -50% building conversion costs. Very nice buff to have in particular, because it means when you take over a region that isn't a part of your culture, it will cost literally 50% less to convert all of its buildings to your own, which is really nice and can be quite costly when you occupy new cities in particular, instead of just tearing down their buildings. For the Odrysian Kingdom, however, we have the Hellenic Peers buff, where we get increased public order from Hellenic culture. So taking over Hellenic areas won't be such a pain in the butt for you. Very nice. You then have the Night Marchers buff, which increases morale at night. Not a game-breaking buff, and it's not bad. Overall, I would say it's a nice one to have, because you might want to be trying to isolate armies of the enemy by engaging in night battles. I know some people avoid night battles because they feel like it's a little OP, but I think it's still a nice little nod at the fighting style of the Odrysians, which is, of course, hitting hard, fast, and when the enemy is not prepared. Then we have one debuff, which is the Separatist Tendencies debuff, which reduces party loyalty. Doesn't tell us by how much, by overall not the biggest debuff in the world, and you should still be able to manage your party loyalty without too many issues if you're playing on normal difficulty, which, keep in mind, this is what all faction overviews are done based on. But anyway, that's it for this section. Let's jump into the part 1 section of the video, where we'll talk about the campaign overview for the Odrysians. Okay, everybody, here we are for the campaign overview for the Odrysians. We are here at your one-hitter quitter settlement. I know we're a one-hitter quitter. It's been a long time since I've been able to say that. And we are in Thrace, of course. We have the city of Odessos. You have literally just the one city, and you are inside the province of Thrace, aka Thracia, or the Thracian region. You have 4 cities total in Thrace, 3 of which are your immediate neighbors, of course. You have Amphia to the south, Nasos to the far west, which is where you will find lead and silver, FYI. And then you have Pulpadeva right here. No resources in it, but it is a very defendable major city, and you might want to consider making it the capital of your empire. You can if you like, or at least for a small amount of time until you find somewhere a little bit more suitable, like a major coastal city. But Odessos being your capital is a little bit of a strategical weakness because your navy sucks. So you can of course be invaded navally, and there's not a lot you can do about it. You then start off with one general, or one king I should say. Your king is leading your army. He is in a Thracian noble Rumfire unit, which is amazing. This is the single best shock infantry unit in the game. Get him involved in combat as much as you can. He is amazing. Let's just very quickly check. I was meant to check this earlier. Yeah, so if we recruit another army, you can get even more noble Rumfire warriors. You could also get Thracian noble bodyguards. And you could also get long spear guards, although I wouldn't really recommend that unless you really just want to get a cheap unit. You have Thracian footmen, Thracian javelin cav, and some Thracian javelin inside of your army. Mercenaries, you have your Thracian mercenary warriors available, which is just your Rumfire warriors, so you may as well recruit those on turn 1, because why not? You then have a lot of options in terms of general recruitment, though. I don't mean generals as in leaders of armies, I just mean as in overall recruitment. On turn 1, one thing that you'll notice compared to previous patches is that all factions start with a barracks in their core city. So Odessos starts off with the level 1 muster field, then you have to work your way up, get various units, blah blah blah. But yeah, that does mean that you can recruit units very quickly. Most of your good warriors come from your warrior social class, however you do have some pretty useful men that you get from your freeman social class. For example, the long spear pelters don't have the best stats in the world, but they're pretty good at holding the line for you, and they'd be pretty good to act as kind of like a Furio spear unit for you early on in the campaign until you get Furio spears. Thracian footmen, they're a good unit, but their armor is lacking, which is a main issue. Then your cavalry comes from your warrior social class. Oh wait, your Thracian footmen does as well. They do have 300 men per unit, but we'll talk more about the units later on. And then you get your cheaper low-tier skirmishers and basic units from your freeman social class. Odessos, of course, has the slaves resource. You can see the little handcuffs right there. If we go to the city of Odessos and look at the major building, it will list slaves as your resource. You get 5 trained slave resources or whatever per tier of building, or at least for your first tier. After that you jump up to 15, then you get to, where is it, 30, and then you get to 60, so it almost doubles every single time, really. I think it does double. Yeah, it does quite literally double every level you go up, so that's cool. Always nice to have. Doubles except for the first one, which triples, so can't complain about that. Oh, and Odessos has a decent population of around 35,000 people, 4,500 of which are warriors, 24k are freemen, and then you have just under 5,000 foreigners, although foreigners doesn't really play too much of a part in it, as you don't really recruit any foreigners in your mercenary pool, so foreigners only come in helpful when you want to recruit your Greek units, but we'll talk about those in a little bit. Diplomacy though, let's jump into it. You start off with no obvious diplomatic relations except for one thing, which is the Talista Bogii or Bogi. You have a non-aggression pact with them.
Friend.
However, they are at war with Macedon on turn 1, so the fact that you're friendly with these people means that Macedon will not like you, and any allies of Macedon will not like you as well. So generally speaking, the Greeks are not going to like you much as a people. Besides this one faction, you have no other already developed diplomatic relations, and most of the people around you don't even want to have any diplomatic relations with you, which is kind of rare to see on a normal difficulty level for your campaign. The only exception to this is the Getae, the Dacian factions. I mean, it's still listed as Dacio-Thracian, but these are the more proper Dacian factions. Getae, the Daci or Deci, however you want to say it. The Bastanos are Celtic, so no, they don't like you either. But the Getae and the Daci, for whatever reason, they really are. They don't really like you, but they're one of the few factions willing to give you some kind of diplomacy on turn one, usually. So that is very interesting. All the other factions aren't really that interested, besides the Tolisto Bogi or Bogi. The Arch Bosphorus Kingdom is not interested in you at all, and that's kind of how it is. A little bit of a shame that you don't get too many diplomatic options, but as time goes on, your diplomacy potential will develop. You attack the enemies of enemies, certain factions are going to like you for it, so that's just kind of how diplomacy works. When you're a faction like this, where you're small, no one cares about you, and no one really likes you. I know it's savage, but that's just the way the world works. So what else should you expect with your diplomacy? Generally speaking, I can't really say what faction is going to declare war on you on what turn. It depends on what you do, but generally speaking, the barbarian factions will be very opportunistic. For example, if you move your army out of Odessos and send it up to attack Polpadeva, I would expect the Finny tribe down here to come up and attack your core settlement. It's just kind of how they operate. They see an opportunity where your capital city is open, they're going to come and hit it. So you might want to take out the Finny first, as they're the only army or only people nearby that can hit you from their faction capital in a single turn. How you want to expand though is up to you, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the end section of this video. So let's keep moving on, talking about the economy. You are a barbarian faction, however, you do have one of the best resources in the game, trained slaves. You then have, like I said, silver to your west, and then to your north up here in this city, you have gold. So you can get some very good resources early on if you like. However, without resources, you're not really going to be getting a lot of trade flowing in, and you won't have a lot of commercial buildings that you can build up. And you also can't do any industry early on. So without industry and general lack of trade and commerce, you're going to be going for an agricultural style of economy, which is not really the most fun economy or the best, but that's typically how I find at least barbarian factions to go. There are exceptions, and if you have a lot of resources, then more factions will be willing to trade with you. But early on, your resources that are near you are still pretty far. You have to march all the way over here to Nasos to get that silver. You got to march through up in this territory into heart of Dacia to get your gold. And then besides that, I mean, it's kind of it until you either go into Anatolia, deep into Anatolia that is, or until you go deep into Greece. And Greece doesn't even have all that much to offer as well in terms of resources. It's a nice region to have, but resources it's not really strong in. There is some more up here, but the nearest province that has lots of good resources would be taking over the Archbosphorus Kingdom's area. They have cities here, here, and here with some good resources. So you might want to consider possibly trying a naval invasion across, because you don't want to be fighting nomadic factions. We'll get into that a little bit more later on. One extra thing I'd recommend for your economy though is to try and specialize your armies as you level up. Where is it? Here it is. Under your traditions tab, you will begin to level up certain traits, and even just for your generals as well, you'll level them up. That's where I would suggest that you try to focus at least some of your armies on getting money from looting and sacking, extra money that is. Especially if you're in an area where you can keep hitting cities over and over that you don't want to keep. For example, you might take Anthea, but then you don't want to cross and occupy territory in Anatolia, at least not for a while. So what you could keep doing is just repeatedly hitting the city of Nicomedia, or one of the other cities that's along the coast, Pergamon, or to the north, whatever. You could just kind of keep crossing, either raiding, sacking, or looting, and just getting money, hitting those cities, and then retreating back and leaving them in a mess. Hit them a few turns later. That could be a really nice way for you to make money, and it makes sense playing as the Odrysians. But that's kind of it for your economy. Not really a lot to say about that. I've got a couple minor things to discuss right now. The first one is there's been a very cool new change given to the Odrysians in the latest update, and that is that you now have access to Greek units. And I'm not talking about mercenaries, I'm talking about them being a part of your core roster. And there's two ways of getting each of the 2 units that you're given. The first way is to go to your ports, and then you want to recruit a harbor, which is a commercial kind of port. Right click on that, and you will see immediately it enables Greek Marines for you, which is pretty cool. Although they're not all that amazing, but still cool. But then you can also recruit colonist hoplites. These are heavily armored Greek hoplites that will come and fight for you. They're not really particularly good hoplites, but they are solid hoplites. They have a good armor of 30, melee defensive 15, and their base morale is at 42, which is not bad considering they're not supposed to be like a typical part of your army. You also get access to pikemen. However, you don't get that from your dock, you get that from the commercial trader building. I can't show you now since we only have 3 little building slots right here, but all you need to do is focus on building your commercial building chain, and then you'll see a building called Trader, and under Traders is where you get your pikemen. Pretty solid pikemen, we'll talk about that a little bit more in the military section of this video. And then now that we've covered the Greek section, I just very quickly want to show you guys your royal family. You actually have legitimately historically based royal families in this 1.3 update. So I do want to try and make sure I show you guys the royal families for every faction that we do an overview on. You start off with King Raistos. He's 38 years old, so he's getting a little bit older. He's married to Mokasokos, how you want to say it. 35 years old. I don't know if they would give us too many more kids at that age, but they do have 2 sons. Telesbta? Wow, that's a tongue twister. 6 years old. And then we have Sufis, or Swethies, at 7. So you have 2 boys, which is good. But like I said, you're kind of getting a little bit older, so I wouldn't expect too many kids to come popping out. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for the campaign side of things. Not really a lot to say about the Odrysians. Pretty small faction, very hard not to crack, and they have an excellent military that we'll now go ahead and talk about. So I'll see you guys when we start the part 2 section of this video. Okay everybody, here we are in the part 2 section of this video where we'll check out the military of the Odrysians, and as you can see, the Rumfire Warriors are out to play. Sunny Gem, fire out, these guys are looking badass. This is our general, one of your general units you can get. You can get, I believe, 4 potential ones in total, although 2 of those units are just a earlier and later version of them. However, this is your general Thracian noble Rumfire Warrior. Before we get into the rest of your many land units, so let's talk very briefly about your navy. Unfortunately, your navy is so poor that I'm not even going to bother showing you guys anything about it. I'm just going to tell you very quickly. Generally, it is very, very poor. Has only the most basic kind of units, mainly axemen, and a maximum of 120 men in a ship. And the highest HP gets is to like 900 and something. I believe about 986, something like that. So not very strong with ships either. You only get 1 skirmishing unit, so skirmishing in naval battles is obviously not going to be for you. Basically, avoid naval combat as much as you can. When you do need to engage in it, try to use your bigger ships and mercenary naval ships wherever possible. But anyway, that's basically it for your navy. Unfortunately, it's not too complex. But, oh my goodness, look at this unit. You can see the lack of love given to the navy is all right here in this single unit, far out. This is one of the most impressive generals units that you can see, really. Man, wouldn't that be a fun video, huh? We'd look at the best looking unit in DEI for generals only. Now that would be pretty sick, I reckon. Let me know your thoughts on that down below. But anyway, let's get into it. Let's talk about these stats, about the units where it matters, and then we'll skip over some of the units that don't really need full coverage. Oh, and FYI, I've done something a little bit different for this faction overview. Let me know what you guys think. You'll see that I have 2 groups, 1 and 2. Both of these 2 groups represent the different reforms that you can get these units at. I tried splitting up each of the reform units into like different areas, so like 4x reforms here, other reforms over here, but it didn't really seem to fit, so I prefer to keep the categories of troops together, e.g. swords, e.g. skirmishers. But what I will try to do in the future, and in this video obviously, is at least group them so I can tell you a little bit easier what unit should belong to what reform level. It's not going to be entirely accurate. Reform levels of units are changed. They're very easy to change, as such they're done not often, but enough to where information might become inaccurate very quickly. That's why I haven't really covered reforms before, but just to let you know, so give you guys a little bit more extra information. The Odrysian Kingdom is based on the Greek reforms, the Therios reforms, and the Thorax reforms. The Therios reforms, of course, occur at Imperium level 3 for the player, and once you hit turn 50. Thorax reforms occur at Imperium level 5 and occur at turn 120. That's your bare minimum to get those reforms kickstarted for your faction. Now, anyway, finally get into talking about your general. This is the Noble Rumfire unit. Now, I believe, I couldn't find concrete answers, but I believe this is the only way you can get the Noble Rumfire unit is through your general. You have two other Rumfire units you could choose from for your general, for your generic units, but this is the only one that attains Noble tiership. You can't recruit Noble Rumfires in custom battles except for listing as your general, so you can recruit them that way, I guess, but in the campaign I kind of noticed the same thing as well. These guys are the best shock infantry in the game, hands down, no doubt. Melee attack of 19 as their base start. Melee defense is quite low at 8, but it's still respectable for a shock infantry unit. Charge bonus of 38, so they charge as hard as some cavalry units, even harder than some. Total weapon damage of 38, that's including her AP. Armor 41, base round 51. These guys are disgusting on every level. And they're disciplined. They do not have guerrilla deployment, but they do have campaign stealth, as does all units now. And they have 200 men per unit. Very amazing general to have. Only lacking in mobility, because it's an infantry unit instead of a cav. So it's probably the one time out of all of DEI I'd recommend an infantry general over a cav general. In most circumstances, not all. Anyway, your skirmishers. Let's get started. We have Thracia Javelin, bottom tier, very, very, very bad unit, but it's Javelin men. Thracian Peltas, these guys are a little bit more professional than the Thracian Javelin men, although they have the same function. However, these guys do have a decent sized shield, some armor at 15, and their melee attack status and whatnot isn't too bad with a total attack of 9. Defense is only at 6, unfortunately. But they have some decent weapon damage at 28, and 7 of that is armor piercing. Not a bad unit overall. Pretty nice and cheap to use on this side of your armies. We didn't have the Noble Peltas unit. Basically just very, very good stats across the entire board when comparing it to the previous Peltas unit. Very high melee attack though, 13. These guys are starting to look like they're almost a shock infantry unit. You can see the little Folks weapon right there as well, so that probably plays a pretty big part in it, I'm assuming. Melee armor piercing damage is just a 7, but it's still very good. Overall damage of 32. Armor is at 25. Range at 95, missile damage at 23. A very nice Peltas unit overall. That's it for your Peltas. We didn't have a single Thracian Slinger and a single Thracian Archer. Both are very, very bad, and unfortunately both have the same range. Your Slingers has the same range as your Archers, and that doesn't mean your Archer's good, that means your Slinger is just that crap. I would really avoid trying to use either of these two units. They're just not worth it in my opinion, and they don't really fit the Odrysian playstyle either. Anyway, let's move on to your Swordsman. We then have your Thracian Footman. Very bad unit, to be honest. It does have some kind of cool aspects about it. 300 men per unit is very nice. Melee attack of 9, weapon damage total of 28, and it has a pretty big bonus versus elephants at 15 for some reason. It's pretty insane. Armor is low at 8 though, but it does have a javelin, so can be useful, but I would not go for that if I could avoid it. especially in exchange for other infantry units that you have. Moving up from there though, we have your Thracian levies, which is actually a move down. So these bad boys are mixed around. I always try to do these lists from the worst to best unit. But Thracian levies aren't worth mentioning, except again, we see that bonus versus elephants of 15. I'm guessing it's because they have Folksmen in there as well, or some kind of armor-piercing unit. Then move up. Thracian Furious Infantry. Now these are the type of guys that I would prefer to have as my main front line. 300 men per unit, they do have a javelin, and the stats are decent across the board. Attack of 9, defense of 9, armor of 15. These guys won't hold the line for a massive amount of time, but they'll do some damage. Probably kill 150 or so enemies depending who they're going up against, and then they'll rout. But because they have so many men in their unit, they should come back from routing as long as they don't get ridden down by enemy calves. So keep that in mind. Not a bad unit at all. Falksman! We have the D or DI, the DI swordsman. Very strong unit. However, it does only have 200 men per unit, so it's a little bit of a downer compared to the others. But stats of an armor of 30, attack of 13, defense of 10. Just, whew, stats across the board are looking very, very nice right now. This is kind of your, almost like a 4x infantry unit for you. Except it seems you don't have to wait for any of the reforms to get them, at least not from what I could tell in my testing. Warriors! We then move up to what is possibly one of the best units that the Odrysians have been given. Now, pound for pound, it's not the best. But this is probably the single most cost-effective unit it is. This is the now notorious Thracian infantry. You guys might remember in a recent online battle I did against the Odrysians, these guys annihilated my main front line. And let's look at why. Melee attack of 11, defensive 10, charge bonus of 22. It's a little bit lower than other Odrysians, but still good. Weapon damage total of 30. Bonus versus elephants is still there of 15, and then an armor of 20. Although I believe before it was an armor of like 30 or something, 35 maybe, when it initially was posted in the update. Then it got altered. An armor of 20 though is still very respectable for a group of good stat men that are 300 men per unit, and they have a javelin. This is very, very solid. This is what you want your main line of armies to be made out of. Excellent unit, big shield. While its armor isn't as strong as it used to be, it's still very, very good overall. Not really too much to complain about regarding it, except, like I said, its armor's kind of going down. So it will be susceptible to skirmisher fire, especially flanking skirmisher fire. But man, 300 men per unit, very impressive unit, and it looks amazing, as do all of these units, especially now that they've been redone. This is the first unit we see on a different reform level though. It is from the 4x reform level, so you won't get it until a little bit later in the game, but you will get it. We then have the Thracian Rumfire Warriors, not available until the Theros reforms, but these guys are the cream and butter of the Odrysian Kingdom. If you ever play against the Odrysian Kingdom in an online battle, or even controlled by the AI, these guys will almost certainly be in an army that is controlled, especially by a player, but just by any Odrysian entity. These guys exist inside of it. The Rumfire Warriors are everywhere. They hit hard, they are absolutely deadly and ruthless, and they will cut your legionnaires to shreds. Their only weakness really being defense. They don't have very good defense. Defense of only 7. They do have good armor at 25, but they are still very susceptible to cavalry charges, especially from the rear, and skirmisher fire, especially long-range skirmisher fire, where these guys can't catch up to them. But man, amazing unit. Very unique, very kind of iconic is a word to describe them. And man, these are just the kinds of guys that you could watch in a battle all day long. They're just very, very badass. Can't get over how good they look. I really hope you guys enjoy seeing them. But it gets even better. Warriors! We then have the late Rumfire Warriors. So let's compare them stat for stat to the previous version. Armor and morale is the difference here, with the late version having an armor of 38, base morale 51, compared to 25 armor and 48 morale for the regular. So armor is a very big increase of 13. Wow. Morale only increases by 3, but that armor increase, wow. And look at these guys. Are you kidding me? Holy crap. Look how good they look, man. No way, dude. I mean, I've played with these guys since the update, but I haven't just like stopped and had a very good close look up at them. Oh my gosh. Dude. This DEI team who's working on this is disgusting. Like, you guys are doing some god tier work, far out. Very impressive infantry roster, and we're not even at the spears yet, but just wanted to take a step back for a second. Very focused on melee troops, skirmishers, focused on close quarters so far. But let's go into your spear department and work our way up. Gotta try and hurry up now, it's been a little while. Thracian light spearmen, basically levy spears, try not to use them. Jumps up to long spear pelters. These guys are different. They do say peltist in the name, but peltist does not necessarily mean a javelin. I know that might be what some of you guys expect, but it actually comes from their shield, which I believe, how do you say the shield on its own? Peltai or pelton? Pelto? Something like that. But it comes from the shield. These guys have the same shield as your skirmishing peltist units, but they don't have any ammunition. They don't have any javelin to throw. What they do have though is a longer than normal spear. Apparently this bloke at the front has a longer spear than everyone else, it looks like. Oh wait, no he doesn't. It's just the angle. They actually don't have consistently high spears. Some are lower than others. That's interesting. Very cool unit, very unique. I really like it. It's one of the units they added in the 1.3 update. Stats across the board are looking pretty good for a mid-tier unit. The only bad thing about it, in my opinion, is that it doesn't have any kind of formation attack. You can't form a shield wall, can't do any kind of pike wall or nothing like that. I wish there was at least a shield wall with these guys. But, I mean, they do have a big-ass shield. You'd think that they could form up something, but, can't make them too strong. Very cool unit, though. Definitely worth taking a look at. We'll then have your Greek units that you get access to. These guys are after the Thurios reforms. Get them from your dockyard, the commercial dockyard. Just a solid hoplite unit. Not bad, but not good. I mean, I would say it's good. Basically gives you a basic front line of Greek hoplites to offer if you do want to try and make up that kind of army composition. But why do that when you can do colonist pikemen? You can get your pikes involved. I know there are some reasons to use hoplites over pikes, but I always prefer using pikes when possible, at least for melee engagements. Statistically, not really a lot to talk about. These two units are just very, very solid, very dependable is another word. Good morale of 42. Both are well armored at 30. Attack and defense stats are excellent. No issues at all with these two units, except you got to recruit them through specific buildings.
Our spears are yours.
We then
warriors
have long spear, Thurio spear units. So you do get Thurios and Thorax units. I didn't realize that until we went into the custom battle. I don't know why I forgot about it, but anyway, you do have them. Your long spear Thurio spears, they are Thurio spearmen that have longer spears. That's kind of how it is. Very good speed of 4, armor 25, attack is pretty high at 12, and defense at 14. These guys are excellent. The only issue with them compared to other Thurios spear units is that they only have 200 men, whereas typically Thurios units will have 300. But yeah, very good, very high quality unit. Just like, dude, look at that guy's shield. Oh my gosh. These shields are brighter than my future and bigger than it. Oh my gosh, they look amazing. We then have the colonist thorax spears, which comparing them to the Thurios, oh yeah, they're way better. All around. Just significantly better stats. The only thing that you really notice a difference in is the charge going from 26 to 19, and the melee attack of the 4X unit going from 12 on the Furios to 8 on the 4X. Pretty big hit. But I mean, besides that, whew, very impressive unit. And it does have some abilities in that it has the defensive formation ability, and it has the reform the line ability, a brand new ability added in the 1.3 update. I have not seen this ability be all that useful yet, but I like that it's been added in, and perhaps it will be tweaked a little bit more in the future. But in my battles that I've done, which isn't admittedly all that much, I haven't really seen it make the units do all that much yet. But if you're watching this far off in the future, it's probably changed already by then, and is a lot more effective. But that's it for your infantry. Let's talk very quickly about your cavalry, and then we'll get into the verdict section of this video. Okay, skirmisher cav, you have some javelins. Very fast cavalry unit. That's the main thing to point out about them. Besides that, they don't have any guerrilla deployment or anything. And their melee stats are actually quite poor, just an attack of 7, defense of 6. Avoid melee engagements with them. Skirmish and scouting, that's all they're good for. Thracian medium cav, though, is another story. They have the same speed, but they have better stats all around. So these are the type of guys that you want to be supporting your army. 120 men in them, as is your other javelin cav unit we just looked at. Pretty excellent cav unit all around. Only real seriously lacking in armor. Armor is only at 13, which is quite poor, but such is the way of the barbarians. Then we get to your melee cav. We have your shock cavalry. It explicitly says shock cavalry, but this is not even a lancer cav unit, so I don't know why they called that. Anyway, they do have a very high charge bonus of 47. Very, very savage with that. They even have a few javelins to throw in the mix, 4 in total. Overall, pretty solid melee stats. Only really lacking armor at only just 23, which isn't terrible. It's enough to help them against low, lightly armored cavalry units. But otherwise, yeah, this is probably another unit that you will want supporting your army. Perhaps... no, you'd probably want the shock cav more than your other unit, but it depends on your style, I guess. We then have Thurios shock cavalry. The other unit is before the Thurios reforms. This is after. Just basically an upgraded version. Stat for stat. We see them be slower with the same amount of armor, so that's kind of disappointing actually. But they do have a bigger shield. Yeah, they have the Thurios shield, which is why they have so much more defense. So another good melee attacking unit that has some javelins. It has 4 in total, so you can see the theme of the cavalry of the Odrysians is shock damage and skirmishing to a small extent.
We'll kill them all.
However, that changes where we see the Lancer cav coming in. This is your Tribali Lancers. Very excellent shock stats all around. It has the stats of like a high tier shock unit, but the armor and whatnot of a lower tier unit, which is kind of interesting. Armor is at 33, attack is all the way at 11, but defense is way down at just 4. Charge bonus is up at 54, which is very nice, but then your speed is like in a low 6. So a little bit of a confusing unit, but quite clearly just recharge the crap out of the enemy with them. If the enemy is still alive after your fire warriors come in, fight them. But very, just once again, amazing looking unit. Fire out, dude. I really need to do more videos based on like the looks of these units. Talk about that. Anyway, we then have Thracian 4X cavalry. That's right, you get a 4X reform level cav unit. Just amazing stats. If you can get this unit, get it in your armies. The only downside of it compared to your other units of cav is that it only has 100 men instead of 120, and it only has 2 javelins instead of 4 like your other Thracian cav do. But I mean, just melee attack of 16, that's disgusting. That's almost like a fire warrior level. Armor 41. I would argue that their high stats are easily worth losing the 20 men over. Very powerful unit. Will kill the majority of cavalry it engages in a long combat instance, basically. Very, very strong.
Thracian Royal Cavalry!
We then move on to your Thracian Noble Cav, one of your bodyguard Cav units. These guys don't have very good defense because they don't have any shield, but they still have an armor of 41. So it kind of sucks when it's like that, where it's clearly a melee orientated Cav unit, but you're just really lacking in that defense because they don't have any way of protecting themselves with essentially no shield. Some of them do have that smaller shield, so you get a tiny shield value of 2, but it's almost pointless. But your armor is 41, so that's very, very heavy. Base morale 51. I mean, very just solid Cav unit. I'd probably prefer the Thorax unit instead, just for that defense of getting you up to 12 defense. But anyway, that is the Odrysian Kingdom's roster. Pretty solid roster all around. Obviously, you are missing long-range skirmishing potential, and long-range horse archers and like that kind of cavalry area. And the majority of your troops are made for attacking. You're a very aggression-based nation. The few units that you do have based on defense are going to be limited in terms of numbers to you. And yeah, you really are basically looking to be as ruthless as you can be with the Odrysians. If I had one word to describe them, it would be ruthless. But anyway, that's enough of this section. Let's go into the final part 3 section of this video, where we'll talk about the verdict of the Odrysians, go over their difficulty, and some final thoughts about the Odrysians. Okay everybody, here we are at the verdict section of the Odrysians. This is going to be a pretty quick one. Not a massive amount to say about them. They're a pretty straightforward faction with not really all that much being hidden. They have one of the best infantry-based armies in DEI, in my opinion. While they are extremely focused on a specific playstyle, they are damn good at it. They are very aggressive, very ruthless, and they will deal a lot of damage to the enemy as long as that damage does not get blunted. And it's typically quite hard for the AI to blunt your damage in online battles. Even if you do manage to blunt the attacking Odrysians coming at you, they will still just charge through whatever it is you blunted them with, and then they will keep going and going. So as long as you are facing a savvy opponent that's controlling the Odrysians, you're going to have a really tough time against them in online battles and campaigns. You don't really see a lot of armor with this faction, although you do with your higher tier units. So obviously that means that you don't want to be stuck in prolonged engagements with other factions that do have high armor. Unless, of course, you're using your armor-piercing units. For example, you want to charge directly into legionnaires with your Rob Fire warriors. You may as well go ahead and take them on. You will beat them. But you don't want to be ground off in like a barbarian versus barbarian clash, where your men are trying to grind their way through a large chunk of Celtic units. There you'll still probably win, as your men are better than theirs, but you will take a lot of losses and drain your manpower unnecessarily. So that's where your good cavalry could come in addition to your peltas units. Strategically, you're not in a bad position. Keep the Greek mercenaries in mind as you begin to expand south. You will need to use them and other foreigner troops as you begin your expansion outwards. And remember, Rome always takes over Epirus, unless somehow Epirus gets beaten by another faction. So you might want to try and get on good terms with Rome early on until you're ready to fight them, or do the good old Odrysian way of doing things and charge head on against Rome and take them out. Your men will be better than Rome's in the majority of circumstances that you'll be fighting them in, except Navy. So you might want to go around the north side of Italy instead of just going across the Adriatic. That might cause you some pretty big issues. Diplomacy looks pretty solid overall. You've got to be pretty much killing everyone around you. Get alliances with the people that you don't want to fight or the enemies of your enemies. I would especially try to get alliances with the nomadic factions to your north, or whoever comes out on top in that fight in the north, as you fighting cavalry-based factions will not be fun. While you do have good cav, your good cav comes in later forms and they are kind of expensive and not necessarily easy to replace on a long protracted campaign. So avoiding fighting the Scythians, any kind of nomadic factions going east towards the Parthians and that, I would avoid if you can, because you don't really have infantry support for your cav. You do have spearmen, but they gotta run a fair distance to keep up. Your long-range skirmishers are really bad, almost non-existent for your faction, in fact. So while your cultists could help out your cav, as can your spears, your cav can get isolated when they're chasing down horse archers. So fighting all cav nations won't be fun, at least if you're fighting in an open field. Try to focus those battles into city battles if you can. And then one last little piece of advice I would give is try to avoid fighting in Anatolia too early. You don't have any reason to rush into the east. While there is some nice rich lands out there and fighting the eastern major powers will be fun, probably need to deal with Rome first. Rome is going to be a big issue for you, and they're going to come at you hard. They knock out the Greeks usually within the first 100 turns, and then by then they will be steamrolling towards your way. So you need to take the initiative with Rome, deal with the Greeks as quickly as you can, get around the Adriatic, and knock out Rome. Once you do that, then feel free to expand east, take on the Egyptians and the Seleucids, factions that will have units that will counter yours, such as their great cavalry, elephants, skirmishers, and their pikemen might be annoying to deal with, but you can recharge them and outmaneuver their infantry pretty easily too. So I would just avoid rushing to the east is my main point there. So the last and final thing to decide is what difficulty level rating are we going to give this. We still operate on a 0 or 1 to 10 level here, with 1 being the easiest faction in DEI and 10 being the hardest. And although you do start off small, you start off with some good units, you start off surrounded by enemies that only have one city themselves, so you can knock them out pretty quick. And your other major powers in the area will be busy dealing with Rome or other major powers such as the Seleucids or whatever. So, all in all, I think this is pretty much a 6 out of 10. This is an above average difficulty rating. I don't think it's going to be all that hard, considering so many of your units are still so good and very cost effective. You do start off small, so that's always going to be a little bit more difficult. However, your nearby enemies are not really all that competent. They're not united against you, at least they're not early on, so hurry up and get to rushing. And I think the Odrysians are a pretty good faction for newer barbarian players to try out. If you haven't played many barbarian factions before, I would recommend playing as these guys or as the Swabi, maybe the Iceni as well, possibly the Averni, although I need to check them out in this update. But yeah, I think these guys are a solid 6 out of 10, as long as you're playing on normal difficulty. It shouldn't be hard, but it shouldn't be easy either. You will need to use some strategy and general common sense, and think about your decisions before you can get yourself a campaign victory. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I really hope you guys are excited to see this series back. Please comment your suggestions for future factions down below. But without any further ado, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one.